and I will briefly introduce our speaker today. Richard Veymiers is the director of the Museum of Mariemont in Belgium and faculty member at the University of Liège with a special focus on museum studies in his teaching. He obtained his PhD in history, art, and archaeology from the University of Liège and has had various fellowships in a number of research institutions in Athens, Paris, Oxford, Los Angeles, Leiden, and so on. He's an expert in the art and archaeology of the Greek and Roman worlds, with research focusing on the cultural interactions throughout the Mediterranean and the role of the material culture in driving these processes. He has published widely on the reception of Egypt and Egyptian gods by the Greeks and Romans, while his interest is also directed towards the cultural biography of objects and the history of collections. These themes will also appear in today's lecture, which centers around an Egyptian marble stela with the representation of Harpokrates between a pair of snake gods. The piece dates from the Roman Imperial period and is now held in the Museum of Mariemont. Richard, if you are ready, then the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. So, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to give this lecture in the Graeco-Aegyptiaca series organized by the Department of Greek and Latin at the University College London and the Paladin Association based in Budapest. And I would like to especially thank our partner and Qatar and Refi for this invitation and opportunity. As you can notice, my French accent is quite strong, so I would like to apologize for this. I will speak today about a series of Egyptian artifacts depicting snake deities. It's a study, actually, which will be published next year by Brepol's publishers in a book entitled Immortal Egypt, a book that reunites the contributions from 3 international workshops organized last year in Paris, London, and Rome. So I will show you today many objects, many artifacts. Some of them had never been photographed so far. Others are still unknown, still unpublished, and they are presented here for the very first time. So let's start with the stela that I know very well. Oh, I tried to... it works. So since 2020, the Royal Museum of Mariemont, that I have the pleasure and the honor to lead, has displayed in its permanent collection exhibit an Egyptian marble stela from the Imperial period featuring a bas-relief scene showing a pair of serpent deities. This artifact, housed in a case dedicated to Roman Egypt, was entrusted by the Museum an der Stroom in Antwerp, a museum inaugurated 10 years ago in 2011, a little bit more than 10 years then, on the former port site of the city. This artifact is a part of a collection of Egyptian antiquities that the city of Antwerp acquired in September 1879 from a French antique dealer, from a French diplomat who was named Eugène Désiré Philippe Allemand. This acquisition, which is the first of its kind in Belgium, it was the first time that Egyptian antiquities were included in a public collection. This acquisition occurred in an atmosphere of Egyptomania, thanks notably to the actions of the members of a Masonic lodge named les Amis du Commerce et la Persévérance Réunis, a Masonic lodge which had built in 1875, so some years earlier, a new temple decorated entirely in Egyptian style. This temple was destroyed in the 80s, but you can still see it on some photographs. And for instance, here, where you have some wall paintings depicting the adoration of Osiris and the adoration of Isis. The antiquities, so the Masonic Lodge helped a lot for this acquisition. The antiquities offered for sale by Eugène Allemand came from excavation he had conducted in the Nile Valley. courtesy of his position as a military attaché to the Khedive of Egypt, to the Viceroy of Egypt. This is what he mentions in a book, in a publication entitled Description historique et religieuse des monuments découverts sur les lieux par l'auteur, a book that he published in London in 1878 to facilitate the sale of his collections of his Egyptian antiquities. In the text inside the book, the bas-relief is associated with the locality of Bena in the southern delta, and then it can thus be attributed to Atribis, the capital of the 10th nome of Lower Egypt, which was actually particularly prosperous in the 2nd century AD, the datation of our artifact. Here is the stela. This is a stela measuring 29.5 centimeters in height and 40 centimeters in length. It is made of white gray marble with blue veins, a marble likely sourced from Egypt, possibly from the northern eastern desert. That's what some expert told me. However, this 7 centimeter thick marble block initially served an architectural purpose, as revealed by the 2 horizontal moldings running across its back, as you can see on the screen. So the block was reused as a stele. It was cut and hollowed to create a bas-relief scene within a rectangular frame. The center of the image, the center of the scene, shows the small Harpokrates, so a child god standing on a pedestal, depicted frontally, naked, wearing the pshent, with a small side lock of hair, his right index finger to his mouth, and holding a cornucopia on his left arm. The son of Isis had already been identified by Eugène Allemand in his book. Eugène Allemand who interpreted the relief as symbolizing prudence et silence, prudence and silence, an interpretation of the gesture of Harpokrates, born in the classical world. You can already find it in the work of Varro, for instance. An interpretation which gained significant prominence starting from the Renaissance. We consider Harpokrates as the god of the silence because he kept the secret on the Egyptian mysteries. Around him, 2 snakes wait on their coattails in a three-quarter view. They flanked so the child god. On the left, a male bearded serpent wearing the pshent and holding a club in its coils. On the right, a female hooded cobra marked by a human chest, crowned with an horned solar disk, and holding a sistrum in its coils. The presence of Harpokrates had led modern commentators to identify the pair of divine serpents with forms of Isis and Serapis, as these commentators perceived the group to represent a singular image of the Isiac triad that developed in Roman Egypt. So Harpokrates with his parents, Isis and Serapis. In this ophiomorphic aspect, a serpent, Serapis would take the form of Agathos Daimon, the good spirit protector of the city of Alexandria, equivalent to the Egyptian god Shai, who presided over fate. And Isis would take the form of Thermuthis, the Egyptian cobra goddess Remenutet, consort of Shai and protector of the harvest. In the entry he wrote about this bas-relief in 1995, the excellent Belgian Egyptologist Jan Kwijgeber, who had written actually a monograph about Shai, thus referred to these divine forms as Isis-Thermuthis for one and Serapis-Agathos Daimon for the other one. However, are such labels truly appropriate? Are they truly relevant? Do they accurately reflect ancient realities? This artifact, this stela, also raises other questions beyond the identification that so often preoccupied image commentators. According to a nominalist approach, that was, for instance, central to the link, the Lexicon Iconographical Mythologiae Classicae in the 80s and the 90s. How was this figurative object conceived? According to what sources of inspiration? To express what message? How was it subsequently perceived? In what context did it circulate? In what framework did it operate? What functions, what practices did it serve? These questions, which delve into the materiality of the object, its anthropology, its agency, and its biography, are challenging to address in the absence of precise contextual data. Only a serial analysis drawing on available parallels, so other stelae, can guide us toward possible answers. Other stelae of this type are also known elsewhere. The examples preserved in the Graeco-Roman Museum of Alexandria were studied by Françoise Dunant, so a French scholar, famous one, in a 40-page article published in 1969 in the famous French Journal of Egyptology, le Bulletin de l'Institut Français d'Archéologie Orientale. This paper, this study, prepared in conjunction with her doctoral thesis on the cult of Isis. It was published in a book some years later as Le culte d'Isis dans le bassin oriental de la Méditerranée. So this study focuses on the meaning of these sculpted images, their theology, and therefore the nature of the divine powers to which they refer, namely Isis and Serapis in the form of Thermuthis and Agathos Daimon. The conclusions of this study, which quickly became the main reference in the field, were included in 1981 in the nominative articles of the link, along with a list of examples. You have some of them on the screen. The corpus is actually much larger, small in size, generally measuring between 30 and 50 centimeters in length. These stelae were easy to transport, and many examples were thus taken out of Egypt to join private or public collections. For example, the National Library of France in Paris holds a limestone stela 40 centimeters high and 30.5 centimeters long, discovered in 1798 during Napoleon's military campaign in Egypt. Very well preserved, as you can see on this photo, the stela, originally painted, takes the form of a small distile edicle with a segmental pediment. Between two papyrus-shaped columns on a common base stands a pair of orthomorphic deities with human heads seen frontally. The bearded head on the left, crowned with the calatos, is that of Serapis, while the one on the right, with labial curls, a diadem, and a basilean flanked with wheat ears, corresponds to his consort, Isis. The stela was donated in 1838 to the Cabinet des Médailles in Paris by one of the members of the Commission of the Sciences and the Arts who accompanied the expedition, the Parisian artist André Duterte, a dwarfed man, who also accurately reproduced it in a preparatory watercolor for the description de l'Égypte. And you have a photo of this watercolor on the screen. It is featured in the plates of the first edition of the Description de l'Égypte, with the corresponding commentary by Edmé François Jomard, identifying this artifact as a kind of altar found near the pyramids of Saqqara. Many bas-reliefs of this type were brought back from Egypt during the 19th century by industrialists such as Émile Guimet or Harry Wellcome, by lawyers as Victor Baringer, by diplomats as Bernardino Drovetti or Eugène Allemand. The closest parallel to the artifact sold by Allemand to the city of Antwerp and now on display in Mariemont, the one I showed you in the beginning of my lecture, the closest parallel is offered by a marble stela unearthed in 2 fragments during excavations carried out at the beginning of the 20th century by the Italian archaeologist Evaristo Breccia on the site of Canopus, in the area where Breccia located the famous Serapis. Now preserved in the Graeco-Roman Museum of Alexandria, the stela depicts a pair of facing divine serpents, the one on the left bearded, with a pshent and a club, the one on the right with an expanded hood, a horn disc, and a sistrum, so the same symbols than on the stela from Mariemont. The 2 reptiles have their tails entwined as a sign of union, and above the knots made by these tails, between the reptiles, a new child god, his right index finger to his mouth, with a single side lock of hair on his head, is seated on a small lotus chalice, a small lotus flower. A third, unpublished stela, depicting a juvenile Horus between 2 divine serpents, was displayed from 1904 in the Isiac Hall of the Museum of Comparative Religion, founded in Paris by the industrialist from Lyon, Émile Guimet. Now in the Louvre, where all the Egyptian objects from the Guimet collection were transferred in 1948, it is made of limestone and was carved in a less refined style, hence the disproportion of the left hand, for instance. The young deity appears as a draped bust with a solar disk atop his head and long hair from which a large curl lock detaches on the left. His right index finger is placed to his mouth again, while his left hand, wrapped in the tunic, supports what appears to be a small club. Around him, the pair of facing serpents with entwined tails occupied opposite positions this time from those they hold on the stelae from Alexandria and Mariemont. On the left, a cobra crowned with her own disc holds an imposing sistrum in its coils, while on the right, a bearded serpent, so the male serpent, wearing the pshent, who holds 2 wheat ears and a poppy in his coils. These few examples suffice to reveal the visual diversity, the visual richness of these artifacts. None of these bas-relief stela is identical to another. The artisan who crafted them from various materials, in limestone, in marble, in granite, used visual elements that they arranged according to multiple combinations. They could remove elements, or on the contrary, they could add some elements. They could reverse 2 elements or substitute 1 element for another to adapt each time the scene, the image, to the message they wish to convey. This material corpus thus presents a wide range of variants. So there is 3 main categories. The first one, it's constituted by stelae, which simply show the pair of serpent deities, sometimes with various symbols in the course of their tails. This example in limestone from the Graeco-Roman Museum of Alexandria, formerly owned by Leonidas Avierino, who was a customs employee member of the Archaeological Society of Alexandria at the end of the 19th century, So this example represents the cobra goddess with her own disc holding a bundle of wheat ears in front of the bearded serpent deity wearing the pshent and presenting a club. For the second category, you can see different stelae, including a divine figure between the reptiles, as we already observed with the child Horus, for instance. On the right, the deity seen between a serpent with the head of Serapis, with an ear of wheat, and a cobra with the head of Isis, with a lit torch on a limestone stela reputedly from Al-Banaza, the ancient Oxyrhynchus, and purchased in New York in 1960 by the Rijksmuseum van Oudheden in Leiden, could also be a so-called canopic deity. A deity often mistakenly identified as solely Osiris, a common identification that overlooks the polyvalence of this mode of representing Egyptian divine powers. The same composition appears on another stele on the left, acquired by Victor Clay Barringer. He was an American lawyer at the Mixed Court of Appeal of Alexandria, and this stele is preserved since 1988 at the Peabody Museum of Yale. It's an unpublished one. However, as you can see on this stela, the pair of divine serpents is represented entirely in an homorphic form. So you can have some Egyptian deities between the reptiles, but also Greek ones. So deities of Greek origin also appear in this series. A stela donated to the Graeco-Roman Museum by another member of the Archaeological Society of Alexandria, Achille, features Demeter standing, veiled, crowned with a calatos, holding a torch and wheat ears between the cobra goddess with basilion with ears and sistrum, and the bearded serpent god with pshent and caduceus. Particularly well-crafted and original is this limestone stela in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, a stela which was purchased before 1903, but we don't know exactly when. A stela which shows the pair of serpents, one crowned with the solar disk with horns and feathers, and the other with the white crown of Upper Egypt, surrounding an engraved image of the Nemesis griffin, seated to the right, its tail raised and curved, its front paw resting on a wheel. The pair of the divine serpents, and it's the third category, can also flank a cult instrument. Some stelae show them on either side of an ovoid vase with a prominent spout and a wide curved handle, an handle sometimes topped with a small ureus. This vase, known as hydria, is believed to contain the life-giving water of the Nile, as this water is imbued, according to the Osirian myth, with emanation from the god's body, from the body of Osiris. This cult vessel can be seen, for instance, on a limestone stela on the right, preserved at the Aegyptian Museum in Berlin, which purchased it in 1980 from Felix von Niemeyer, who was a diplomat active at the German consulate in Alexandria. This artifact, in the shape of an Egyptian edicle this time, crowned with a frieze of uriae, places the hydria on a vegetal crown between a cobra goddess seen frontally this time, with an horn disc and sistrum, and a bearded serpent with a pshent, poppy, and wheat ears. On another limestone stela on the left, a stela which was purchased in New York in 2004 by the Swiss foundation, the Foundation Gandour in Geneva, you can see that the cult vessels rest here on a lotus flower. Some examples feature also an altar between the divine serpents, sometimes supporting a pine cone as an offering. This is the case, for instance, on the left with a granite stela, unpublished, a stela who was acquired in Egypt in 1931 for the British industrialist Henry Wellcome. He was a pharmaceutical, I will make it in English, pharmaceutical industrialist. That's it. Henry Wellcome. So, and this stela was preserved since 1971 at the University of Swansea. A more imposing altar rises between the serpents, each holding a poppy and two ears of wheat, on a rectangular marble stela that was part of the collection purchased in 1824 from Bernardino Drovetti, consul de France in Egypt, to form the core of the Museo Egizio in Turin. Such a diversity naturally raises the question of the meaning behind all these images. Images which are related to the visual culture of Alexandria and its core during the Imperial period. The pair of divine serpents, it's a type frequently used in the provincial coinage of Alexandria in the 2nd and the 3rd centuries. It first appeared in the year 10 of Hadrian in 125-126 on the reverse of a series of silver tetradrachms, which actually combine two coin types introduced earlier during Nero's reign. While the image of the bearded serpent wearing the pschent appears on tetradrachms from the year 3 of Nero, tetradrachms bearing the legend Neo-Agathos Daimon, the image of the female cobra.
Okay, buddy. Okay, buddy.
Yeah.
Okay, buddy.
Okay. So the image of the female cobra with her own disc seemed to appear on bronzes from the years 14 of Nero. On the tetradrachms of the year 10 of Hadrian, as you can see here, the two serpents raised a club between them, while each holds another symbol in the course of their tails, a caduceus for one and a sistrum for the other. A variant of the same issue reverses the position of the reptiles and substitutes the sistrums with an ear of wheat. When the type was reused later in bronze coinage this time, during the year 18 of Hadrian, so 8 years later, in 133-134, it appears in varying combinations with the symbols held by the two serpents changing from one series to another. It is then seen again, always with variations, on the reverse of bronze issues struck later under the reigns of Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius, Commodus, Philip the Arab, and Claudius Gothicus. So during the 2nd and the 3rd centuries AD. All these monetary images present less sophisticated visual composition than those on the stelae, which often include, as you noticed, a divine effigy or a cult instrument between the serpents. However, these additional motifs, such as the Nemesis griffins, for instance, or the canopic deity, belong to the same visual universe, as they were also used as monetary types by the civic authorities of Alexandria without being necessarily associated with the pair of serpents. A bronze series struck during the year 24 of Antoninus Pius, so in 160-161, is nevertheless an exception. The reverse type features a known altar between the two divine serpents, and above the altar, at the height of the reptilian heads, a divine bust seen frontally and resembling that of Serapis, floats in the field of the image. And you will find on other stela later in my lecture the same bust depicting the same god. Popular on coins, the image of the pair of divine serpents also appears on other kinds of objects used in less official spheres. Such is the case with gems from the 2nd or 3rd centuries. So gems, so personal objects similar in size to coins. Gems that depict them in a composite form with the head of Serapis and the head of Isis. These engraved stones carved in intaglio may have served as ornaments, seals, talismans, or even receptacles for magical practices, such as this green jasper on the left, featuring next to the image the Egyptian vox magica Benkook. On a rectangular amulet of blue glass paste, imitating lapis lazuli, the pair of serpents surround Serapis enthroned between Isis and Demeter. This divine sequence, unique in glyptic, actually combines two Alexandrian coin types, revealing the inter-iconicity that existed between gems and coins at this time. There is an intermediarity, a real network of objects with many interactions between them. The two reptiles are also present in Egyptian jewelry from the Imperial period. A particularly elaborate pair of gold bracelets above, bracelets dated from the 1st or 2nd century, depicts them as angry pets with entwined tails, holding a cornucopia and a patera on each side of a large calathos adorned with a poppy and 2 wheat ears. On another bracelet of the same type, below, 2 crowned serpents, one on the left with the Atef, the other on the right with the Basilean, flank a group of 2 goddesses composed of Tyche and Aphrodite Daimon, so Aphrodite winging her hair. Such coexistence of divine images reflects the religious landscape of Roman Egypt and the dynamics of contacts and exchanges that existed between divine powers with multiple faces. This is further exemplified by the engraved image on 2 bronze bracelets dated from the 2nd or 3rd century, bracelets that I published 10 years ago, which shows an entire pantheon with Serapis in the center, Serapis occupying the dominant positions. And our 2 serpent deities reappear there, flanking on one a seated god, perhaps Harpokrates, but I'm not sure, and on the other one 2 so-called canopic deities. Coins, gems, jewels, and other objects, textiles, for instance, demonstrate alongside stone stelae that the image of the pair of divine serpents was fully part of the visual culture of Roman Egypt. Given that these items could travel over long distances, it is not surprising to find some of them outside the Nile Valley, outside Egypt, in other parts of the Roman world. And this is the case with a grey-wake statuette of Isis Lactans, reportedly found in Campania, in Italy, on the site of the Roman colony of Forum Popilii, the modern-day municipality of Carinola. This small sculpture in the round, dated from the 2nd century AD and presumably imported from Egypt during antiquity, shows the goddess on a throne with an open-work back and armrests accommodating reclining sphinxes. Relief scenes have been incorporated between the feet of the throne. The Nemesis griffin, again, on each side panel, and the pair of our divine serpents on the back panel. The cobra goddess, crowned with her own disc and holding a poppy and two large ears of wheat, faces a bearded serpent now wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt, still another variant. The identity of the two serpents thus depicted is not readily apparent. The Alexandrian coinage of the year 3 of Nero shows that the bearded serpent wearing the pshent could have been labeled as Agathos Daimon. Endowed with a human head, crowned with a calathos, he also partakes in the nature of Serapis, who watch over the city of Alexandria as Agathos Daimon, as the good spirits. However, no written sources corroborate the name Serapis-Agathos Daimon, which actually exists only in modern classifications. Concerning the female cobra, the female cobra, crowned with her own disc, sometimes embellished with feathers, partakes in the nature of Isis and/or Thermuthis. The theonym Isis-Thermuthis is in any case well attested in antiquity, notably at the temple of Medinet Madi, ancient Nabutis, in the southwestern part of the Fayum. Under the name of Hermutis or Isis-Thermuthis, the main goddess of this sanctuary is coupled with an Agathos Daimon who is not identified with Serapis, but with the local crocodile god Canopus. Several bas-reliefs found in the temple of Medinet Madi actually depict her with a female torso attached to a serpent's tail, nursing a small crocodile corresponding to their son, named Anchoes. In the Egyptian religious landscape, divine associations were reconfigured according to location, and the divine powers composing them could have taken on various names and various forms, with fluctuating spheres of competence. It is therefore quite difficult and even inappropriate to apply a generic name to an image, like a trademark, without considering the great fluidity of Egyptian polytheism, the great plasticity of divine Egyptian images. There is no basis for asserting that the bearded serpent deity always referred to Serapis, who sometimes appears alongside him, as you could see on other stela that I will show you later. Such divine forms lend themselves to multiple identities and could be perceived differently depending on the circumstances. The label used in our modern classification may thus obscure rather than reveal the broad semantic spectrum of all these images. Caution is therefore necessary when interpreting a scene like this one, though this one presented by this Arcasian limestone stela, purchased by the British Museum in 1911 from an antique dealer in Cairo. The artifact, likely dating from the Imperial period, depicts a pair of hooded divine serpents with human heads standing on a draped base. While the symbols of the goddess indeed point to Isis, you can see the basileon, the Libyan curves, those of the serpent-bodied deity are less easily identifiable. Bearded with braids, he wears a calathos, before which 3 mitres are placed on ram's horns, forming a kind of horn. This headdress has most often been attributed to an Egyptian form of Dionysus, another stele in the British Museum, dated from the 1st or 2nd century and reportedly from Naucratis, unmistakably depicts a juvenile angry pet Dionysus, dressed in a nebris, and the nebris is this foam skin, and holding a cornucopia and a bunch of grapes. His crown, again, with the hem crown. This marble stela confirms that alongside Isis, alongside Serapis, other deities could appear in Roman Egypt in the form of a serpent. And this is also the case for Anubis, for instance, as you can notice on this bronze statuette from the Imperial period. We are therefore dealing with a genuine mode of representation of divine powers. And this is also illustrated by other limestone stelae, associating two hooded serpents with human heads in a frontal view. On the left, an example unpublished from the 2nd or 3rd century, formerly owned by the Swiss Egyptologist Gustave Géquier. And on this example, a cobra goddess with the head of Isis is paired with a juvenile, beardless serpent deity to frame a floating bust of Serapis at the height of their faces, like on the coin. On another later example, on the right, an example with a schematical style and traces of paint, an example purchased in 1971 by the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, two identical serpent deities stand on either side of a seated Harpokrates above a lotus flower. One may suggest identifying Hermanubis and Isis around Serapis on the first one, for instance, and on the other one, on the right, Isis and her younger sister Nephthys protecting the small Harpokrates. Why not? But the range of possibilities is broader, compelling us to resist the modern temptation to always settle on a single interpretation, especially for objects whose original context is unknown. While these stelae lend themselves to varied interpretations, they could appear in multiple contexts and they serve various functions. It is possible that some of them had a funerary use. The exhibition Alexandria Past Features, presented by Mariemont in Brussels and after in Marseille in 2022-2023, linked the stela found in 1798 during the Napoleon's campaign near the necropolis of Saqqara to a section of the exhibition called the City of the Dead. Another stela of this type, made of limestone and preserved today at the University of Liverpool in UK, undoubtedly comes from a funerary context. It was discovered in 1907 by British archaeologist John Garstang in a Greco-Roman necropolis of Abydos in Upper Egypt. Its rudimentary relief was originally adorned with painted decorations, no less that an old photograph from the archives of Garstang allows us to appreciate. And you can see all the details that we can lose when we don't have the painting on this kind of artifacts. On this photograph, you can see that on either side of a wide-necked curled vessel, we see the serpent-bodied Isis and Serapis, heads turned forwards, crowned and held. In such a location, inside the necropolis, the divine couple likely serve as guardians of the tomb, watching over the deceased and his new life in the afterlife. Tombs are far from being the only context in which these artifacts were used. Many stelae of this type probably relate also to sanctuaries, to cult places, like we saw that before, the example unearthed by Evaristo Breccia in the sacred area of Canopus, near the Serapis. Most often, these were likely votive objects offered to the divine owners by individuals, by donors with varying intentions. This was the purpose of this limestone stela, reputedly from Antinoe, which also belonged to the Guimet Museum before entering the Louvre in 1948. Fragmentary, it depicts within a medical 2 serpents with entwined tails, one with the head of Isis, encircling an hydria, topped with a small erebus. An inscription engraved below the relief informs us that it was dedicated by a certain Achilleus, son of Heracleides, to Helios great Serapis, to Helios megas Serapis. This inscription ends with the expression eb agato, meaning for the good, indicating that it was a propitiatory act. A similar formula is found on a fragmentary granite stela from the Greco-Roman Museum in Alexandria, showing the pair of serpents on either side of a bust of Serapis. Evidently, the donors were materializing through this formula the hope that the divine beneficiary would favor them in return. I give you this stela, and in return you will favor me. Once consecrated in the sanctuary, such offerings were often displayed to other worshippers to inspire admiration or perhaps encourage them to make similar gestures. The backside of this stela was sometimes sculpted in a way that allowed them to be embedded in a wall. This is notably the case, I have other examples, with a small limestone stela bearing traces of polychromy, which was unearthed in 1985-1986 at Harpokrates during excavation by the Egypt Exploration Fund. British archaeologists tend to date it to the 1st or 2nd century and to attribute this stela to an imperial period sanctuary dedicated to Isis. But sanctuaries are not the only possible locations for display, and one cannot exclude its use, for example, in a domestic setting, where the image of the divine serpents would ensure the protection of the household. Various literary sources from the imperial period echo the cult paid in Egypt to snakes as protectors of the home. And of course, it's a long Greek tradition. But I think it's almost 1 hour I speak, so let's conclude now. Analyzing an isolated object whose original archaeological context is unknown is always delicate. The Egyptian stela on loan in Mariemont and the similar bas-reliefs that have found their way into private and public collections over the course of their lives are a prime example. One must be cautious about labeling too quickly such artifacts featuring a pair of serpent deities, confining them within generic categories that risk distancing us from ancient realities. When placed in series alongside each other, these small stelae, characteristic of Roman Egypt, constitute a rather heterogeneous material group. Evidently, they function differently depending on the context and the circumstances, lending themselves to a multitude of readings and uses that we can attempt to specify with method and caution, but that ultimately often elude us. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Richard, for this incredibly rich and fascinating paper. It was really stunning to watch all these interconnected objects, and I really like your approach of not trying to label the images with fixed names, because I think we are beginning to see this more and more clearly in relation to Roman Egypt, that it's not working. And yeah, I'm sure there will be plenty of questions. You can either use the raise hand feature in Zoom or just type your question in the chat. We have many congratulations. Do we have any any questions?
Or comments or some new ideas.
Yeah. While people are thinking, let me just ask a quick question about the bronze bracelets. Is there any context where those come from, or any ideas what social stratum we can tie these to? So is this a priestly something, or we have no idea?
Well, no idea. Actually, the plate from Paris was published in the 19th century as a bronze plate, a magical one that nobody can understand. And actually, it's the one that I found in Boston who helped me to understand that it was a part of a bronze bracelet. And actually with different gods, some Greek origin gods, but also some Egyptian one. And it's a category of bracelet. We don't have many examples. I only know these two examples, but they don't have an archaeological context, just Egyptian. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Dr. Bianchi.
Richard, thank you very much for the interesting presentation. I have a comment. The very first stele that you showed us from Anvers, which is that gray lined marble.
Yeah.
Might that actually be marble from Provenances in Turkey? Because it's the same marble that we have on certain sarcophagi in the Greco-Roman Museum that we think is from that part of the world.
This is interesting because actually, I have to reopen my PowerPoint. Yes, actually, we were not sure about that. And for the identification of the marble, I asked the opinion of a couple of experts who just published a book. Maybe you know it. It's Pierre de l'Égypte ancienne by Thierry de Putter and Christina Karl-Zosen. And
Yes.
then we really think that this marble should be Egyptian, but it's not sure. We need some analysis to be sure, actually, and to compare some other objects in marbles who has the same origin. But for me, it makes sense. It could be from abroad as well. Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah. So from Turkey, and where exactly?
Provenances, it's on the Aegean coast.
Aegean coast. Yeah.
I might be able to send you some references to that.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that. Yeah, maybe it's very clear. Yeah, thank you very much, Ron.
You're welcome.
Okay, questions are coming in the chat. So first, a quick one from Andy Hale. Richard, do you have any more information with the bracelet that incorporated Aphrodite?
Of Aphrodite?
Yeah.
Oh, no, actually, I only have this these bracelets, but this type of Aphrodite is quite popular in Roman Egypt. Yes, on different kind of objects. We did the association of with this kind of divine serpents. We have this on these bracelets. I think also on the bronze one inside the Pantheon, one Aphrodite is present. But yeah, I cannot say a lot of more about that, except that this image, this divine form of Aphrodite is quite popular in Roman Egypt in the 2nd century, 3rd century AD.
Okay, thank you. Richard, you might want to open the chat yourself because it's going to be long. I'm going to read it out. It's from Arpad. He says, "Dear Richard, thank you for this magnificent talk. I greatly appreciated your approach, la méthode sérielle, which is also highly significant when studying magical gems. Two questions are coming. You have shown us coins and magical gems featuring the pair of snakes motif. While the first group is well dated, the second is not. Indeed, it seems almost impossible to establish a chronological framework for magical gems. This leads to my question. Do you think it would be possible to date the gems depicting this pair of snakes by drawing parallels with the coins you have presented?"
Not precisely, but yes, of course, thanks to the coins, we can have some in French, some repères, some clues to date it. But of course, this image were popular on coins during almost 2 centuries. So, and the gems looks like from the same periods, but more precisely, it's quite difficult to be sure. You know, and you agree about the stylistic approach on gems that actually doesn't work. Most of the examples, the gems with this kind of image are without context. We don't have a lot, only some of them with the 2 divine forms, and also some other one who shows only the male serpent or the cobra goddess also. But it's not a lot, it's like 20 or 30 different gems. And only some can be considered as magic. For instance, this one was unpublished as well, with this Egyptian common vox magica Bangkok. This Egyptian who means the spirit of darkness that you know very well, and we can see on other kind of images, of course.
Okay, thank you. Arpad, would you like to comment, or? I don't know.
Actually, I don't see the chat, so.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you. I wonder if there is any possibility to so observing the small details of the composition. Is it possible to go a little bit further? I'm asking just because I just wrote a paper about this topic, analyzing the first known magical gem. So the first magical gem with known provenance, this from Augsburg, and so I'm a little bit in this field, and so hence my question: do you see any possibility to go further?
I think so, yeah. If you reconstruct this network of images, you can really understand the functioning of this iconography, and it's why it's very important to have a serial analysis and to put all these objects together and analyze them as a network, because really the intermediality, the inter-iconicity is there, and sometimes you can really understand the visual strategy of the craftsman. For instance, here with this amulet, you really see that it joined 2 Alexandrian coin types who are quite precisely dated, Adrian and Trajan, so the beginning of the 2nd century, and probably the amulets that were no idea about the datations can be probably considered as to the same period. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible to be more precise, to go further. I really think so. But for that, it's why it's still important to make catalogs of all these objects, to publish them, because sometimes a new object can just can really shed lights on another one.
Yeah, absolutely. And just being here, I tell you my second question. Can you tell us a little bit more about the distribution of these stelae? Are they attested only in Egypt, or do we also have pieces from other provenances?
Actually, all of them comes from Egypt, and we don't know almost. we don't know a lot about the context of them, except some exceptions, like the Abydos one. But it doesn't look that this kind of stela was made outside Egypt. Probably most of the time they are in European or American museums because some collectors took them in the 19th century most of the time. There is a marble stela that I published in the Revue Archéologique I think more than 6 years ago. It's not the same style, it's not Egyptians, and it's also in marble. And it's very interesting because it shows you on one side the male serpent with the head of Serapis, and on the other side the personification of Annona. And it was found in Italy and probably related to the trades of wheat between Alexandria and Ostia at this time. So this is a very interesting artifact, but related to another context to convey another message. And this is clear that actually we have this god snake who represent on this image the city of Alexandria in a way. So there is other stela with this kind of iconography. Of course, this kind of image was copied outside Egypt.
So thank you, Richard.
No worries, you're welcome.
Yeah, I think when the asked question was answered, I'm going to Imre Sárközi, who asked, do we know other type of jewelry with this motif too, or only bracelets, maybe rings or necklaces?
Yes, there is some rings. There are some, I know some rings where the bezel is engraved, and also precisely with the image of Aphrodite, with the two snake gods, but not a lot. Not just a few of them. I don't have a good image, that's why I didn't include it. But it's not very common. But you can also have some gold rings with this kind of image too. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. A question from Dina Metawi. In one of the slides included in this presentation, you mentioned the cult object that appears between the two serpents. It looked like a certain type of cult vessel or cauldron. Would you kindly repeat its name?
I didn't understand the question exactly.
So what is the name of the vessel that appeared between the serpents?
Yeah,
I don't
what we
know
call
if you can clearly
hydria, I think in English, but en français, c'est une hydrie. It's a very common cult vessels in the Isis cults, actually, outside Egypt as well. Yeah, so it's quite common. Yeah.
So it's something specifically related to water or the water of the Nile.
Yeah, it's what we consider because we can. It's very common on the iconography of the Egyptian cults, also outside Egypt, and it's considered as a sacred vessel was supposed to contain the water from the Nile, and it's sacred because the water of the Nile is supposedly contained to be imbued with the body of Osiris. After he was killed by Seth, it's related to the Osirian myth, and it's what this vessel, these cult vessels, became so important in the cult of Isis outside Egypt. But it's also vessels very popular in Egypt itself, and the meaning there is broader. Yeah, it's a symbol of life, of Renaissance. Yeah, but some Egyptologists could say a lot about that. This kind of vessels, you can find it everywhere in Egypt. The meaning in Egypt, it's different than the meaning outside Egypt as well.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Rambo. Very interesting. Is there a relationship between the Greek myth of Heracles and the snakes, even symbolic?
Oh God.
Yeah, you see, this comes because of the club.
It's a good question. I don't know, but as some scholars were surprising to see in Roman Egypt a club, and so they call it the club of Heracles. But you know, like any attributes, it could be held by other gods. That's why you have plastic, you have this kind of fluidity. So it's not necessarily related to Heracles. So I don't think it's necessary to see Heracles behind this kind of image. And after, everything is possible. It depends on the context. So Heracles was also reinterpreted in Egypt. Some very good specialists wrote good papers about that. And already 40 years ago, Gisèle Claire, for instance, in France.
Is it possible to ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, Murtaza Chopra speaking. Wanted to ask you. You said that this imagery is moving, like it can be used in different ways. But would you see a kind of original pattern for this imagery? Is it just related to the canopy, or can we go further? And is it in before the Hellenistic period? Is it attested in?
Actually, all this documentation is from Imperial period.
Yes.
So there is no one that we can be sure that is Hellenistic. Only one has been dated from Hellenistic period, but it's the one that I show you in the end, where we have a god with a kind of M crown, the one was kept here in the British Museum, because you have this arcasing style, and so from some scholars, but it was in only stylistic criteria. It was maybe Hellenistic, but we know that this kind of style has also a life during the Imperial period. And when we have a visual culture approach, we can see that most probably it's also Imperial. We cannot be sure before. And so it's quite difficult, of course, to address this kind of question about the origin of the pattern. Is it the coin? We don't know. I know that most of the time scholars like this kind of quest of origin. You know, what was the prototype? What was the first images? But most of the time we don't know, actually. And it's maybe not necessary to think that there is only one document who was copied. It's not what this kind of object shows, because they are all different in details, at least. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. We have some more. Wojtek asked, thank you, Richard, for such a fabulous talk. Do we have any artifacts with similar imagery from any of the temples of Isis and Serapis in Greece?
The question is about this kind of image in Greece?
Yes, in Isis and Serapis temples in Greece.
No.
If we have any.
We don't have this kind of image in Greece, at least in temples. Yeah, we have, for instance, a ring showing a plastic representation of the snake with the head of Serapis, and it was found in Cyprus. But it's a ring, an object that can travel on long distances. So I don't know in a cultic context this kind of image, and certainly not the two serpents, the couple of serpents. But each of them can travel, of course, as I mentioned for the question of Harpad. This kind of composite image of the god can also be copied and used outside Egypt. So I will not be surprised if we can find this kind of imagery in Greece in the future. It's possible, but probably the meaning will be totally different, of course.
Thank you. One more question in the chat from Andy here. Richard, don't you find it interesting that both Isis, Horus, and Serapis are connected in this stela with what could also be said by form?
By?
Isis, Horus, and Serapis are connected in this stele with what could also be Set or Typhon.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question, sorry.
Yeah, Andy, are you here? Would you like to explain what you mean? No, maybe he'll come back. In the meanwhile, then let's switch to Vasiliki Panousi. Can you ask your question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for this rich and illuminating talk. I was wondering, perhaps your argument about the fluidity of iconography that you spoke about in your interpretation of the images points to the to a sense of intent for that fluidity to exist for the audience. So would you speculate that people would see these deities, they would see these images and would see in them the deities that were most meaningful for them, given, of course, some representational limitations that, of course, exist?
Yeah, but the perception of the audience, actually, yeah. I think it's also possible that in front of the same image, it depends with the cultural background of the individuals. They could see different stuff, not mainly the same gods. You know, it's this kind of coexistence of readings as well around this kind of composite images. Françoise Dunant wrote a very good paper about that in 1999 about this polysemy of the same documents, and it really could be that there is no clues to go further. So it's delicate to say more or about that, to make more assumptions. But yes, I really think that the perception could vary depending on the audience and the cultural background of individuals who see them, who saw them. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then we have one last question. Okay, first I'll go to Bob Bianchi. The numismatics issues around 40 BCE of the Sistophores by Mark Antony be antecedents?
So it's another question about coins?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what's the question exactly?
Bob, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, Richard, around 40 BCE, Mark Antony issues a series of coins. The reverse has the image of a Sista Mystica, and it is flanked on each side by a single snake. The images that I've been able to see are not very clear, but it appears that on some, one of the serpents on those coins has a beard, the other one is beardless. So my question is, might two serpents, one male, one female, acting as kind of guardians over a sacred object, somehow be an antecedent or alluded to by the later issues? Because you show that the earliest numismatic evidence we have for the motif you're discussing are either Nero or Hadrian. And it seems to me that that's something, because what's even more compelling in all of this is that I believe that the images you're showing are rooted in pharaonic Egyptian imagery. And I say that because in the hieroglyphic system, a male gender is always represented by the horned viper, and a goddess is always represented by a cobra. And on all of the images that you're showing us, gender is represented by what type of snake is being represented. And then I think you have to go back to that one in the British Museum and ask, why is the male figure identified maybe as Serapis shown with the cobra body? There's that one. That's very, very perplexing to me, because there's a gender swapping going on there. So I think that when we're trying to identify these images, the serpent is also key to the gender, and that may also unlock the identification of the deity being represented.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. Yeah, it's very interesting. And of course, there is an Egyptian pharaonic background of this imagery. It's very clear with the Isis-Thermuthis and Henenudets. This is very clear. You can really see the continuity and the transformation during the Greco-Roman period. As the function as protector and guardians, yeah, this is very common as well. But there is also a Greek tradition, a long Greek traditions about this role of snakes that we can find also in Egypt during this time. So really, we have, I think, a mix of cultural influences there, but for the images and the mix of gender, it deserves more investigation. But this is true. It's very interesting to address this on this perspective as well. Yeah. Thank you for your comments. Yeah. The Systema Mystica, you spoke about that. This is, yeah, of course, you have also snakes around the Systema Mystica. It's another imagery. It's another instrument cult. Sometimes some scholars make a confusion between the Systema Mystica and the cult vessel I showed before, because it's also topped with a snake, but it's not the same snake than on the system. So yeah, of course, there you can have some fluidity around this kind of cult image. But the Systema Mystica comes from a Greek imagery. So it's very interesting to see this mixture and of different influence from different cultures.
Well, thank you, everyone. Andy, I don't know, would you like to get back to your question that you've elaborated on in the chat? So you are connecting the Seth figure with the killer of Serapis and its appearance, as opposed to the Agathos Daimon. But yes. Okay, Richard, can you see the question?
No, actually, I don't see the chat. I have to maybe to leave my diaporama to.
Okay, I'll try again. So the original question was, don't you find it interesting that both Isis, Horus, and Serapis are connected in this stela with what could also be Seth or Typhon? And this connection is linked to Seth being the killer of Serapis, as opposed to the interpretation of Agathos Daimon. What do you think?
I don't see the question in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the question is about the interactions between the different gods, Isis, Serapis, and Isis. And yeah, I don't really.
Yeah, it's not really clear to me how Seth comes in the picture. Okay. Andy, if you okay. I think we have no more comments. I think we'll leave this question now then, because we.
Okay, I still try to find the chat, but I can't.
Yeah, you mean because I think he means Seth can be associated. Seth can be associated with a snake, but I think that's a dangerous area, isn't it? Because there are so many deities that can be associated with the snake in Egyptian imagery. That
Egypt, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so
yeah.
the Greek world as well, but in Egypt still more.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. I think we've run out of questions, and then what's left is I would like to thank Richard again for this fascinating talk. It was really, really interesting. Thank you for coming, and I think we'll meet next in the Graeco-Aegyptiaca lectures in January. So we'll be back with news till then. And thank you very much again, Richard, and everyone for coming.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.